The fivefold system is the progression that is active in form. This is one of the major progressions of numbers that we live with. 5 is the number from which our understanding of the golden mean is generated. This is a method of proportioning the growth of plants and animals. It's the series of numbers that is dominant in the expression of form. We have another progression of 8 that is dominant in the expression of vibration. Successions of 5 and 8 are two different lengths that are both associated with the two different levels of the creative process of Nada Brahma, the world emerging from sound. To make that just a little bit clearer, whenever you hear a musical note, you are actually hearing the interaction of two numbers as a ratio. If you have a fundamental note, this ratio is 1/1. The second note, moving up the major diatonic scale, is 9/8. That's what sound is. It's a relationship between numbers, and all these numbers are reducible to our first number, the principle of the duality and the emergence of the first form, which is a triangle. The number 10 is just another phase of the unity as a number, and its inverse always equals 1 or 10. This is the unmanifest phase of powers and energies, which were a pre-existent configuration to the manifestation of the world. The manifestation of the world begins then with 10. Then what we get is a series of ratios that are particularly active together as vibrations that produce sound. The first 9 whole numbers and their inverse are all the powerful harmonics of sound. These are the powers of sound creating form. When you hear music, you hear it and are responding to it because these sounds are actually creating forms within the cellular composition of your body. You're listening to the birth of form. That's the power that music has. You're at the center of the act of creation. Those sounds are created by a state or being in relationship to its own opposite, oppositional progressions. The one non-harmonic ratio in this series is the relationship of 7:3. While all these other ratios are creative relationships, this one is the relationship of destruction. This is the way the Creator transforms his creation through a process of cyclic destruction. You cannot be born and reborn without going through a disintegration of the previous form. It's the cyclic necessity of the creation to have a time that both creates and destroys. Now, as we have seen in our little number exercise, a ratio is the comparison of two numbers. When this comparison happens in a controlled release of vibration, you get sound. And that sound principle is the origin of an evolution of substance throughout the environment. This structure of the seed is an analog of the basic tetractys, which is also the analog of the 4 ages and 10 yugas that carries forward the genesis of humanity. The containing ratio of all sound, and therefore all substance, is the ratio of 1 to 2, the octave. This ratio is detectable in every culture. Every human that has ever heard sound recognizes this as a return to a new beginning. That is what generates a new scale. The scale starts over in the octave. That's why a musical scale is contained within an octave. Let's say that 1 equals 6 vibrations and 2 would equal 12 vibrations. And then there are 2 notes that are in between 6 and 12. The 2 major chords that make up all of the entire process of harmony and harmonization, whether it be in music or in vibrations, that are in an atomic level or in a molecular level, would be sounding in harmony. The 1 over here is equal to 3/4 and 2/3 of the 6 to 12, and that would be 8 to 9. You can describe the principal tones of the musical scale, which has 4 numbers, 6, 8, 9, and 12, starting with the fundamental, then the 4th, the 5th, and then the octave. This principle of inversion is what we represent with ratios. A ratio of space, 9 to 8, will sound in the inverse of 8 to 9, and vice versa. The fundamental is 1/1, which is 6 Hz. The 4th is 4/3, which is 8 Hz. The fifth is 3/2, which is 9 Hz. And the octave is 2/1, 12 Hz. In music, there is this interconnection between the divisions of space and divisions of time. Overlapping between space and time is what we'll be investigating and discovering throughout everything, our exploration of the Yuga system and also the measures of the Earth. As a single example of perhaps hundreds of different harmonic ratios that are expressed and actually form the cohesion on a level of consciousness, there is a ratio between the orbit of the planet Mercury and the orbit of the Earth, which is the ratio 4:1. 4 orbits exactly to the 1 orbit of the Earth. This is from a book, Cycles of Heaven, that was compiled in relation to astronomers that provided the data on which they were able to discover ancient knowledge inherent in the solar system. Continuing again, the orbit of the planet Mercury to the orbit of Venus is the ratio of 5:2. The orbit of Uranus to Mars is exactly the ratio of 3:1. The orbit of Mars to Jupiter is 6:1. The orbit of Jupiter to Saturn is again 5:2. The orbit of Uranus to Neptune is exactly an octave, 2:1. The orbit of Neptune to Pluto is exactly in musical fit of 3:2. In ancient times, Saturn was often referred to as the outer sun. In other words, planets were believed to actually be held between the forces of the Sun and Saturn. There's a very interesting relationship between the planet Saturn and our moon. The moon has a rotation cycle of 29.5 days, which is a transposition of the exact number of years of the Saturn cycle, 29.5 years. These are the forces that hold the universe together, and these are also the forces that are represented in the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Where Brahma is Rajas, the forces of spin, motion, and movement, the creative father of the entire system. Vishnu is his Satya, which means intelligence. It is the cohesive force that maintains the continuity of the whole system. And Shiva is the force of transformation and disintegration. Hindus say of Shiva that he is the most powerful Lord because there is nothing in the universe that does not arise from disintegration. As the Lord of disintegration, he maintains that through his form as Mahakala. Scientists who postulate that everything resulted from one big bang are ignorant of the true nature of the system in which we live. The ancients, particularly in Egypt and India, had a way of thinking that allowed them to discover that this entire system is musical. It is the harmonies of sound, echoing eternally through the infinite ether, and all of that is simply an imagination and idea that occurred in the mind of the Creator. This is something that is found throughout all the Puranic texts. One of the well-known methods of geometric teachings is the idea of squaring the circle. This means a student of the Pythagorean teachings was asked to find a circle and square which had the same measure in their perimeters. This is something that is found to pre-exist within the measures of the Earth and the Moon. We must remember that the diameter of the Earth is approximately 7,920 miles. If we look at a square which has a side equal to the diameter of the Earth, each side has a measure of 7,920 for a total perimeter of 31,680. If we take a circle with that same circumference of 31,680, it will have a radius of 5,040, which is the number of the Kali Yuga. If you take the radius of such a circle, which is 3,960, and add it to the radius of the moon, which is 1,080, you also get the number of the Kali Yuga, which is 5,040. Let's look at this circle with the perimeter of 31,680. If you inscribe within this circle a 10-sided figure, you form a chord of that circle to 1 to 10, which gives us an arc measurement of 3,168. Remember, we're talking about 10 yugas to a Mahakulpa. In the previous episode, we revealed that the full length of the Kali Yuga is 6,048 years. Half of that yuga gives us the number of 3,024. If we put the arc measurement of our circle, 3,168, over this half yuga number, we find that they have the same relationship as 3 over pi. This ratio, 3 over pi, is found in the human body and also in classical proportions. It is the ratio of the height of man to his arm span, which is the same ratio as the 10 yugas in the circle of the earth. This is a time period which is resonant with the movement and size of our earth and our bodies, the body of the earth and the body of man. How much of this was known to the people who first came upon the yuga system? No one truly knows. But where we are looking from our perspective in time, this kind of information is becoming available. The other interesting thing is that when you put the moon on top of the earth, you can build a right triangle from their measures. One side is the radius of the moon, which is 1,080 miles. Another side is the radius of the earth, which is 3,960 miles. This gives us the hypotenuse of 4,104. The measures of each side of this triangle are all multiples of 72, and 2 times 72 is equal to 144. Let's take a look at the embedded harmony of 144. 144 is, of course, 12 squared. 12 is the number that not only dominates the spatial relationship of the Earth and Moon, but it also controls time, with 12 hours on a clock and 12 months in a year. The vision of the cycles of the Earth are spatially imprinted. Thus, we are continually confronting harmonic relationships that cross over or transpose between time and space. If these are the underlying organizing principles of space, do they and are they also found in time? We shall see that they do. The precession of the equinox is a retrograde motion through each of the zodiac signs. The precession moves 1 degree every 72 years. At the beginning of spring, the sun rises with a certain backdrop of stars in the zodiac. It will move backwards 1 degree every 72 years and emerge after 360 degrees or 25,920 years back at the same place. This precession of the equinox is recorded and noted in Stonehenge, in the monuments in Peru, and it is one of the sight lines found at the Great Pyramid. All of these megaliths keep track of this rate of precession. Plato called it the Great Year. In other words, it is analogous to what we experience every year with the Earth passing around the Sun. The sequence of numbers that we have looked at previously, 216, 432, 864, and so on, are all multiples of 72 and are inherent in this number of years for time. It's very interesting that you find in the Yuga numbers that are all composed of the same forces or principles that these numbers represent. The number 2,160 is the diameter of the moon measured in miles. And it is also the duration of time it takes to precess through one sign of the zodiac, 2,160 years. Simply inverse the 0 from the end and write it as 2016 to find a number in the Yuga system. 2016 is 1/3 of the full duration of the Kali Yuga. What we see is that 2016 is a multiple of 7, and 2160 is a multiple of 3. This gives us the relationship of 7 to 3, which we discussed as the relationship of destruction. We are looking at an inherent ratio that occurs in the simple inversion of the sequence of 1 to 10. 10 is the number of our fingers and toes, and that principle is reiterated in every one of the dimensions. When you find 4,320 in the precession, you'll find 4,032 in the Yuga. If you work it out into the basic ratio that's being expressed here, it's 14 to 15. 4,320 over 15 equals 288. 4,032 over 14 equals 288. The Yuga to the precessional. You can do that with all of the numbers. We can see that these numbers express the relationship not only between space and time, but also the idea that music and vibration are the language of the universe. That's why this is the Yuga principle.